The center position in the NBA is currently hot. At the time of creating this video, the first round of the NBA playoffs is in full swing with players such as Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, Bam Adebayo, and of course Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic not just contributing to, but acting as the driving force for their respective team. The current crop of bigs in the association is a wonderful blend of players who entered the league with draft pedigree and some who were off the radar. Some who imposed their will with game-changing defense and energy, others with a truly diverse offensive skill set that is unquestionably an indicator of the ever-evolving game of basketball. In today's video, I'll be breaking down the turbulent history of the center position in the NBA, as in the past 2 decades or so, while also deep diving on the 2 spectacles who, in my opinion, are most responsible for bringing the center position back. Alright, so first things first, to discuss how the center position has been brought back, we first need to establish that it went somewhere, right? To do this, I came up with and analyzed a few different, completely unscientific data points and criteria in order to get an understanding of how the center position has evolved. Again, I'll emphasize, this was all my own research and how I chose to interpret the discussion at hand. It's unscientific, but I'll be honest, I had a blast. Okay, so the first thing I did was create a chart. Yeah, a beast of a chart. Look at that beautiful chart. This chart, while intricate in its design, is actually super basic. It's each and every All-NBA center selection since the year 2000, with first team on the left, then second, then third, as I'm sure you all figured out already. My first takeaway from putting this chart together was just the sheer dominance it put on display from 2 centers in particular during the 2000s, Shaquille O'Neal and Dwight Howard. Shaq had 7 straight first-team All-NBA nods, as well another third team while he was playing for the Phoenix Suns, while Dwight, who was notably omitted from the NBA 75 team, had 5 straight first-team nods, as well as second and third team or 2. I should also mention here, there were a handful of dudes whose position designations caused me nothing but headaches while researching this video. I'm talking about Amari Stoudemire, who made 5 All-NBA teams in a 7-season stretch, as well Anthony Davis, who had a run of 3 in 4 seasons. Both these players have bounced between being listed as a center and power forward, but to me, they both power forwards, bruh. I mean, consider that the Suns were consistently seeking out and playing dudes at center alongside Amari all through his prime run. Kurt Thomas, Boris Diaw, even freaking Shaquille O'Neal. Same goes for Anthony Davis, who has been staunch in his desire to not play center, leading the Lakers to routinely give the likes of JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard, and DeAndre Jordan minutes. In 2018, when AD was named All-NBA first team at center, he played alongside DeMarcus Cousins for majority of the season. This all doesn't matter, but I was bamboozled by these 2 and felt the need to share. Anyways, the first question I had when trying to understand the landscape of the center position was how all NBA centers have affected winning in the past 2 decades. I mean, that's a pretty baseline way to gauge impact. So I applied a simple criteria to my chart, which was eliminating all the centers who failed to make the conference finals in the year they were selected for All-NBA. Immediately with this look at the chart, we're able to see a shifting of eras in the NBA. It also proved that I'm not an idiot for making this video. I mean, there's clear evidence. The center position went somewhere. Between 2000 and 2010, roughly the first half of our chart, there was at least 1 All-NBA center in the conference finals every single year. 6 of those 11 seasons, there were at least 2 All-NBA centers playing in the conference finals, and in 4 of those 11 seasons, there were 3 All-NBA centers playing in the conference finals. That's like substantial. If you had a great center, you had a valid shot at making a deep run. It's also at this point I should acknowledge the 4th column on our chart, with Jermaine O'Neal, Tim Duncan, and Pau Gasol listed. Those 3 players also caused some headaches for me in terms of their listed position. See, for Jermaine, he was an All-NBA center in 2003, but made All-NBA as a forward in 2004. However, as the Pacers made a deep run in 2004, his position estimate indicates he was still a center. Confusing. Similarly, Pau Gasol entered the league with Memphis as a power forward, but during the Lakers' championship run in the late 2000s, his position estimates indicate he was indeed a center, even with Andrew Bynum on the roster. So I tossed Pau along with Jermaine and Tim Duncan on our chart, as they each made All-NBA during the season in which they appeared. And now that I've mentioned him, let's chat Tim Duncan. The big fundamental entered the league as a power forward, which was clear as he'd slide alongside David Robinson to form one of the greatest front court duos ever. In his career, Duncan would be named All-NBA an astonishing 15 times, 14 of which with a forward designation. However, Timmy D's career is split almost evenly into two halves, one in which he was listed as a power forward the first half, and the second as a center. Position estimates indicate he flipped to playing primarily center minutes during the 06-07 season, and for the rest of his career, basically only played center. To further complicate matters, the NBA finally acknowledged his shift in 2013 when he was named first team All-NBA at center for the one and only time in his career, before making third team again as a forward in 2015. Honestly, these diatribes are all just me nerding out over the weird All-NBA system. But in any event, I'm considering Duncan a center for the seasons in which he was technically listed as a center. The next step I took in research was an obvious one, reducing the list down to the All-NBA centers who made the NBA Finals. The list drops from 25 players in total down to just 14 and has some pretty interesting tells. Once again, the 2000s were obviously dominated by big men, as in 9 out of 11 seasons, there was at least one All-NBA center appearing in the NBA Finals. 3 of those 11 seasons featured a head-to-head All-NBA center matchup, which is awesome. I say that, of course, because it hasn't happened in an eternity. Consider that since 2011, we've had an All-NBA center in the NBA Finals just 2 times. I mean, that's honestly insane. I was pretty sure when I set out to make this video that any research done would support my hypothesis, that the NBA has gone away from traditional dominant bigs leading their teams. But to have just 2 guys in 11 seasons in the finals, including a stretch of 6 straight seasons without? I mean, the plight of the center position over the past decade or so is real. Oh, and just because I updated the chart one step further, I may as well drive this point home even further. 8 out of 11 seasons to begin the millennium saw an All-NBA center lifting the Larry OB. Once in the past 11 seasons has that been a reality. Sheesh. Okay, but since All-NBA voting isn't the end-all be-all, I decided to mock up another chart for some research. Here you're looking at 3 lists analyzing the center position since the year 2000, including the top MVP finish for the position, the top Rookie of the Year finish, and the top points per game finisher. Again, I was in search of anything that jumped out as interesting, and without any expectation, I did have some curious findings. Firstly, let's look at the MVP, the big enchilada of NBA honors, which in 2000 was taken home by the one and only Shaquille O'Neal. Yeah. After that, however, well, it was about 20 years before another center would win it. Wow. But looking past the outright winner, which of course does give us a nice look at where the center position was and now is, I was just as curious to find out whether or not centers were actually in the mix for the award. And yeah, this data is crazy to think about. Of course, there was a heavy dose of Shaq in the early 2000s, but as well as some Jermaine O'Neal, Tim Duncan, and Dwight Howard mixed in, as we would see a center finish in the top 5 of MVP voting in 11 of 12 seasons. 11! 6 of those centers, by the way, finished top 3 in voting. Once again, we saw a major flip after 2011, as between 2012 and 2020, we had a center finish in the top 5 in MVP voting just 2 times in 9 seasons, and not a single top 3 finish. Fun fact, by the way, the highest MVP finisher during that stretch I mentioned was Joakim Noah at 4th in 2014. Unreal. So the MVP award is one obvious way that Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic have brought back the center position, and trust me, we're getting to them. But also consider the scoring title, which once again was won by Shaquille O'Neal back in 2000, and the fact that between 2000 and 2005, a center finished in the top 5 for league scoring in 5 of 6 seasons. Now, 4 of those did belong to Shaq, but still impressive. From 2006 through 2014, we basically stopped having centers acting as primary scorers for their teams, as just 1 time in 9 seasons did we see a center finish top 5 in league scoring. I will say that a lot of the data we're pouring over is widely touched by Dwight Howard. As established, D12 was All-NBA 7 straight seasons in his prime and was the highest MVP finisher at the center position for 5 straight. However, he never cracked the top 10 in league scoring. Since 2015 though, we've had a center finish top 5 in scoring 6 of 8 seasons, including 2022 when Joel Embiid took home the first center scoring title since Diesel himself. So while the wins and deep playoff runs haven't been linked to centers in the past decade or so, we've certainly seen an uptick in prolific scoring numbers from the 5 spot. Finally, because I went to the trouble to include it, I'll give a shout here to my Rookie of the Year findings, which were minimal. Just a single win for a center-listed player since 2000, Karl Anthony Towns in 2016. Emeka Okafor narrowly edged Dwight Howard back in 2005, but Okafor was listed as a power forward. I mean, it's neither here nor there. Centers don't be winning Rookie of the Year. Okay, and we arrive at the final set of data points that I wanted to analyze: centers and the NBA draft. I assume that with the relative decline in impact centers as we entered the 2010s, we would notice a trend that originated at the draft. As you can see, however, up until 2015, we had a pretty steady flow of centers entering the league in the lottery, as well centers routinely taken top 3. Obviously, as the league was still being dominated by Shaq and other bigs, we saw teams compensate, as between 2000 and 2007, a center was selected first overall in 5 of 8 drafts. Those centers, for the record: Kwame Brown, Yao Ming, Dwight Howard, Andrew Bogut, and Greg Oden, batting below 500 in my humble opinion. In the ensuing years, just 2 centers were drafted first overall out of 14 total drafts: Karl Anthony Towns in 15 and DeAndre Ayton in 18. In hindsight, both picks have some baggage, as Devin Booker was selected at 13 in the Cat draft, while Ayton was picked ahead of Luka Doncic, Trae Young, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, not a swing and a miss on either player, not 2 home runs either, maybe a pair of legged out triples or something. On average, there were 3.71 centers taken in the lottery from 2000 through 2013. That number dipped, as just 2.25 centers have been taken in the lottery since. Something that contradicts my point a bit when it comes to Jokic and Embiid reviving the center position is that in the past 3 drafts, there's been just 3 centers taken in the lottery in total. Maybe the NBA is simply nonplussed at the recent dominance from certain bigs in the league. Maybe it just means those certain few will have an extended run of dominance. Because again, all this data was super revealing in how it showcased the decline in importance of the center position as we entered into a new era back in 2010. However, despite what the recent draft record has shown us, the center position is once again booming. The day is June 26, 2014. The location is the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, where the newest crop of young talent is being drafted into the NBA. Sitting atop the draft, a pair of athletic wing players from blue blood schools in Andrew Wiggins and Jabari Parker. Those 2 lads from Kansas and Duke respectively would be the first 2 picks off the board, but the most tantalizing prospect in the draft would fall to Philadelphia at number 3, a 7-foot beast with untapped potential from Cameroon, Joel Embiid. In the run-up to the draft, Embiid was frequently projected to be the number 1 overall pick, as he was clearly viewed as the best player in the draft, albeit with one caveat. That caveat, of course, was health, as Joel suffered a stress fracture in his back which kept him out of the NCAA tourney, then a broken navicular bone in his foot just prior to the draft. I'm not sure what that is exactly, so let's just keep it moving. Although Embiid falling to number 3 appears foolish with hindsight, it's hard to blame teams for having their doubts about a truly large individual who had nagging back and foot injuries. In fact, those injuries would plague Joel for 2 years, as he'd sit out both the 2014-15 and the 2015-16 season recovering from multiple foot surgeries. Thankfully, the processing 76ers didn't care about winning games at the time and were able to patiently nurture their future star back to health. Embiid would finally make his NBA debut on October 26, 2016, dropping an impressive 20 points, 7 boards. Wait, hold on, just a moment. We weren't quite done with the 2014 draft yet. Rewind, please. The 2014 draft was a low watermark for the NBA in terms of centers drafted in the lottery, as it was just Joel Embiid, no others. Outside of the lottery, however, Jusuf Nurkic was taken at 16, Clint Capella at 25, Jarnell Stokes at 35, and finally Nikola Jokic to Denver at 41st overall. Yeah, that's right, Joker was a 2nd rounder, introducing a little chaos into the NBA. It's always fun to look back on projections for players prior to their draft. Here we learn that Jokic's upside, quote, isn't too spectacular. Not athletic, fair enough. Oh, also that his best case scenario comparison is Boris Diaw. Not a bad player. Pero Antic, okay, he was a person. This game isn't really fair. I mean, it's all hindsight. But come on with this line, quote, there's no shame in being a respectable reserve on a winning team in the future. My guy really said that with his chest. SMH. Now obviously, in contrast to Embiid's exorbitant expectations, there were 0 expectations for Jokic. So instead of attempting to jump directly into the association, Nikola would stay for another year in Serbia, wherein he'd lead his team Mega Vizura to the playoffs, winning regular season MVP along the way. Oh, and yeah, we're gonna ignore that this article called him a power forward. I mean, what are they trying to do to me? Jokic would appear in 5 Summer League games for the Nuggets in 2015. As a player without strong draft capital, capital, eventually being rewarded with a contract after a solid showing. He'd make his NBA debut on October 28, 2015, about a calendar year prior to Embiid, scoring just a single basket in 4 minutes of action. By season's end, Jokic was officially on the radar, 10, 7, and 2 averages, while finishing third in Rookie of the Year voting. As mentioned earlier in this video, Karl Anthony Towns was voted Rookie of the Year in 16, establishing himself as the frontrunner to take the dominant center mantle into the latter stages of the decade. And now we are good to jump back to 2016, where, as mentioned, Joel Embiid would finally debut for Philly, and Nikola Jokic would take a leap for Denver. The Nuggets were incredibly patient with their future star, as Jokic would actually come off the bench in 14 of the first 25 games of the 16-17 season. He'd average a modest 11, 7, and 3 per game during that stretch. After becoming a full-time starter, however, Jokic would average 19 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists per game in the final 51 games of the season. He notched 6 triple-doubles, which was good for 4th in the league, finished as the runner-up in most improved player voting, and had quickly established himself as a premier center in the NBA. So much so that he'd be ranked as the 16th best player in the league by ESPN prior to the following season. Just 3 years after he was projected to be a respectable reserve, by the way. Embiid, meanwhile, continued to be an enigma as he finally hit the court. He'd suit up in just 31 games for the Sixers, but was an absolute spectacle during those games. As a rookie, Joel would post a line of 20 points, 8 rebounds, and nearly 3 blocks a game. Despite hitting the hardwood for just about a third of the games during the regular season, Embiid's impact was so gargantuan that he still finished third in Rookie of the Year voting. Unlike his counterpart, the NBA world still had some reservations about Embiid moving forward. And again, with hindsight, it looks silly, but we had barely seen the man on the court. Joel was ranked number 32 on the ESPN Top 100 list heading into 17-18, a seemingly reserved placement thanks again to his injuries, but I had a chuckle when reading the ESPN write-up on him. He shot better than Reggie Miller, blocked shots like Hakeem, scored like Wilt, but yeah, let's not be too high on the man. By the way, both Embiid and Jokic would remain behind both Karl Anthony Towns, as well sometimes center, sometimes not Anthony Davis on that top 100 list. But not for long. Joel Embiid would officially arrive during the 2017-18 campaign, and in doing so took a leg up on Nikola Jokic in their battle for center supremacy. Embiid would average 23 and 11 en route to a second-team All-NBA selection, an All-Star appearance as a starter, a 12th place MVP finish, and a playoff berth for his 76ers. He was also beginning to get the nod of approval from the court of public opinion on his greatness. Nikola Jokic, meanwhile, was on the other side of public opinion, as he'd become the go-to answer for who's the most underrated NBA player. Because Embiid's game and draft story was a bit more noisy, Jokic averaging 19, 11, and 6 in just his third NBA season had somehow flown under the radar. He wouldn't be rewarded with an All-NBA or All-Star selection, nor did he gain any MVP buzz. Some hipster fans, though, were on the Jokic wave early, so congrats to these folks. Also, gosh darn, Cat keeps catching strays out here, what? Anyways, the 76ers would flame out in round 2 while Jokic and the Nuggets missed the playoffs, so their impact was yet to really be felt around the league, but things would begin to shift in 2018-19. Joel Embiid was the highest ranked center on ESPN's top 100 list, outside of Anthony Davis's annoying self, of course, with Kevin Arnovitz positing that Joel seemed determined to challenge the notion that a big man couldn't be viewed as the best player in the league. Nikola Jokic too was shown love, coming in at number 12 on the list, with Bobby Marks outlining the pressure on the big Serbian to lead Denver back to the promised land. Folks, Nikola would do that, and then some. For the season, Jokic would see an uptick in his per-game averages once again, 20 points, 11 rebounds, and 7 assists on well over 50% shooting. He notched 12 triple-doubles on the season, which was second in the league, made his first All-Star game, finished 4th in MVP voting, all while leading Denver to a 54-28 record, good for second in the West. While Jokic was recognized for his fabulous season, it's a bit wild in hindsight to see the monstrous leap Joel Embiid took in 18-19. He'd eventually be named to the second-team All-NBA after averaging for the season 28 points, 14 rebounds, and 4 assists per game? I mean, I'll be honest, I forgot how dominant Joel was that season. Embiid would finish just behind Jokic in both All-NBA and MVP voting, and both he and his Philadelphia 76ers, along with Nikola and his Nuggets, would make the second round of the NBA playoffs. Unfortunately, though, our hope of seeing a center-led unit potentially advancing to the NBA Finals was rudely cut short. First, on May 12, 2019, by CJ McCollum doing this.
8 to shoot. McCollum the drive, pushback jumper, it's good! CJ McCollum with 37.
Second, about 3 hours later, it was Kawhi Leonard's turn.
It's off to Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger?
I mean, what are you gonna do about that? Though it was heartbreak for both our heroes during the 2019 playoffs, I do believe it was a definite inflection point with regards to the data I poured over earlier in this video. This was the point we were clearly out of the mud at the center position. Consider that heading into the 2019-20 season, Jokic and Embiid were ranked 7th and 8th on the ESPN Top 100 list respectively, putting two centers in a position of power for the first time in an eternity. More importantly than their individual projections, however, it's key to note that both Jokic's Nuggets and Embiid's 76ers were ranked within the top 8 of teams favored to win the title. We could also toss in another center-led team in Utah Jazz with Rudy Gobert too. Now I obviously can't rewrite history, and unfortunately for Nuggets and 76er fans, neither Embiid nor Jokic has powered a team to a championship since their conjoined ascent into superstardom. But my goal in this video was to put on display the transition the NBA has gone through, from a league dominated by centers in the early 2000s to the position being a complete non-factor in terms of impacting winning through the mid-2010s. Anthony Davis and Nikola Jokic would meet in the 2020 Western Conference Finals, giving us the first matchup of all NBA centers that deep into the playoffs since 2013. Because yes, AD was named first team All-NBA as a center. Since that moment, Nikola Jokic has gone on to win an NBA MVP award, more than likely win a second in back-to-back years pending an official announcement here from the league, while maintaining Denver's contender status despite missing multiple key pieces of their roster. Joel Embiid, meanwhile, appears poised to lead his 76ers on a deep playoff run here in 2022. In fact, at the time of creating this video, I'd say it would be a letdown if Philly doesn't at least make a conference finals appearance. Embiid will most likely finish second in MVP voting for the second consecutive year, as he rewrote the history books this season by averaging 30.6 points per game, becoming the first center to win the scoring title since Shaquille O'Neal. Guys, there was a stretch of time in the NBA in which DeAndre Jordan was a perennial All-NBAer. 34-year-old Pau Gasol, Al Jefferson, and freaking Andre Drummond represented the center position on the All-NBA teams. With all due respect to each of those players, of course, the NBA center position was in a truly bad spot. For the value that each of those players did bring, each of us would be lying if we tried to suggest any of those names had a legitimate shot at leading their respective teams to an NBA title. But as outlined in this video, the current crop of players has given new life to the center position. We have multiple giants, each playing a unique style of basketball that is in many ways revolutionary. Although we've yet to see either Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic lift the Larry O.B., I do feel confident in saying these two superstars have brought back the center position.